Hello, my name is Adrena Thomas and I am a consultant for A Plus College Ready. Today I will be training you on a strategy called the human timeline. What is the human timeline? The human timeline is a strategy to help our students learn how to place things in chronological order. It's essential in the development of students' historical understanding. A timeline is a method to help students with picturing or seeing history over a period of time or decade or centuries. How does the human timeline work? Well, the strategy is utilized to help students take acquired content, materials, resources, and apply them in this manner. They're able to develop historical frame of reference and process time analysis. They're able to describe, comparing, and contrasting multiple related topics to a single topic. They're able to understand the concept of periodization, taking a certain period of time and putting it in order, and also with coherence as it relates to a series of events. How do you prepare as an educator for the human timeline? The first thing you must do is identify what events you want to focus on as it relates to the concept or theme. Put in those steps. Why are they so important? Then once you identify what you want to talk about, then you got to read and research. You can use the information that you're currently teaching. You can pull out secondary resources, but you must read and research so you can know how things are placed in order. Then you must create. So we have identify, you must read and research, and then you must create. Create those series of events. You may decide to just choose in the beginning 5 events, but you're going to create those events. And then once you create those events, then you're going to place them. And one of the resources that we say you can use is stock paper. But when you're looking at materials, you can use stock paper, you can use Post-its, but you got to place those events in order. Once those events are placed in order, then you're going to shuffle those events and mix them up, because that's where though you're going to distribute that information to the students. So let's review. You must identify, you must read and research your information, you must create how you want to place those things in order, and then you got to shuffle them and mix them up. And finally, you must record those events on the timeline graphic organizer that's on the next slide. Once you record those events, then the key is you must come up with a newspaper headline that connects with those events, because that's where we're allowing our students to step outside the box. Not only are they able to look at those events and put them in order, but they're able to create a headline that connects with those events. This is simply an example of one of the graphic organizers that you can use. And this is where, as you see the directions, the students will organize the events and place them in chronological order, but they're required to use a newspaper headline in drafting the approach. This resource is provided in your teacher resource manual. Now, remember we talked about periodization. That's one of the things that help with the human timeline. So this is just another graphic organizer that you can use if you're deciding to focus on a certain period of time. You'll pull out the key people during that period of time, the events or developments, those terms that may seem unfamiliar, and then a major event in order during that periodization. So the first organizer talked about just pulling out a certain concept or theme, but this is actually dealing with periodization. So we understand what the human timeline is. We understand how it works. We've looked at the organizers. Now it is time to go in and start working the human timeline. What is our process? What is the procedure of the human timeline? First and foremost, you must have your resources. Provide the students with secondary reading, because they have already read what they're about to put in order, but this is also providing them with another resource. Once they read that resource, then they must annotate. Go in and make sure they understand, they know what the words mean, they have an understanding of it. Once they've read it, then they are provided with an organizer. In that organizer, they're able to put things in chronological order. Now remember, you've already done it too, so you can kind of guide them if they're going right or if they're messing up. After you've given them the organizer, then they're required to complete the organizer on their own first. They'll complete it, they'll put it in order, and then you allow them to be placed in groups of 2 to 4. And this gives them an opportunity to kind of compare and see maybe if they were correct, if they were on the same path, if it's some changes that they need. Because remember, we're trying to teach them to also learn from each other. Then you're going to select. This is the time where you're actually getting to the human timeline. You're going to select the exact number of students as you've written on your paper. So if you decided to do 5 events at that time, you'll select 5 random students. Okay? During that time, you'll ask the students to stand in line. Now they've read the information. They know in their view how it should be placed in order. And so you're going to say, I want you to stand in line. While you're in line, you're not able to talk. You're not able to make any hand gestures, but I'm going to give you these events in newspaper headlines. And as a group, you're going to be required to place these events in order. Now, remember, you've already shuffled the events. So when you give it to them, they're not in order. So the students will get in line, they'll look at their events, and they'll kind of put their events in order from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, depending on how many events that you chose. Remember though, you're going to give them 2 minutes, but if you feel that your students may need a little time, then you can alter that time. Once the time is up, then you will see if their timeline is correct. Now, if their timeline is not correct, at this time, you can choose another 5 or 10 students, depending on the events. You give them 2 minutes or however long you feel. They have an opportunity to place the events in order. If theirs is correct, then as a class, you're going to post your timeline. Then you're going to start debriefing and saying, okay, why did we decide to put this event first? Why did we decide to put this event in 3rd place? And I believe this human timeline not only teaches the students how to put things in order, but helps them understand why it's in that order. So at this time, you may have some struggling students. We have provided in our manual strategies or tips that you can use for your students that may be struggling, because we understand everybody in every class is not on the same level. So what can you do? You can limit the number of events in the timeline, or you can break the timeline up into segments. We're just going to work on this part of the events or this segment of the timeline. You can also identify the terms, the people, the places, and then place those in order in the timeline. You can provide the kids with more clues as it pertains to the newspaper headlines that you've given them, kind of where they can understand what it is without actually telling them the answer. And then also you can make the secondary resources modified, a reading that they can understand is not so complex. Now, for your advanced students, these are for your students that you can kind of stretch. Here are some tips that you can use for them. Make the secondary resource that they're reading, make it at a higher grade level. This is where you're challenging them in their reading skills. You can expand the timeline. Don't just do 5, 10, or 15. Maybe give them 20 events. You can have the students identify the events, and they can make challenging headlines. You can also provide them with less contextual clues in the headlines, required for them to kind of interpret and dig deeper to find the answer. So in a review, in my conclusion, what is the human timeline? The human timeline is simply a strategy used to help students place things in order. You can use it when you're looking at periodization, Coherence, when you're looking at one major event and trying to place that in order. Remember, when you're preparing, you give the students the resources, they read the resources, they place those in order while you're helping them. You allow them to work in groups to kind of compare their information. And then you pick your students of how many events you've placed originally in order. You'll go back and you'll pick those number of students. Those students cannot talk during the human timeline, but they're required to put those events in order. If it's correct, we post it as a class. We talk about why it's in that place. Why do we put those events in first, second, third, fourth, fifth? And then we're making sure and understanding that the students not only know the information, can place it in order, but they can justify. And that concludes your training for the human timeline. Thank you.